Let's turn to our business segment. Sean Pellegrin is joining us for that. We're going to start with a hotly anticipated iPhone launch at Apple's headquarters. Particularly watched this one. What's the fuss about, Sean?
The fuss was all about iPhone 16 and its variants that will go on sale on September 20th, with the basic model selling for $799, about 723 euros. It'll be more expensive in France, though. CEO Tim Cook and his team presented a wide range of new features: an external camera button, longer-lasting batteries, more powerful chips, and enhanced privacy. They also unveiled new AirPods that could be used as hearing aids. But the most anticipated feature and add-ons was the inclusion of artificial intelligence. Back in June at its developer conference, the tech giant presented its new foray into AI, and this phone is really built to handle the new technology with, for instance, ChatGPT incorporated into the Siri voice assistant. But as analyst Bob O'Donnell explains, most of these AI features won't be available right away. But Apple is still banking on people trading in their older devices so that they are ready when they do come online.
Honestly, I'm not convinced that, the capabilities that they introduce are going to drive that many people to upgrade. What I found really interesting, actually, is how much they focused on trade-ins. I don't remember them ever talking so much about trade-ins to encourage people to upgrade. And, the other problem, of course, is all of the initial AI models are US English only. So that cuts out, a decent portion of the world. And some of this stuff won't come until next year for other regions around the world in other languages. So that's a bit of a hit when you think about Apple from a global perspective.
Yeah, so Sean, how important then is this for Apple?
Well, Apple's been really lagging behind in the race to include AI technology in its handsets, and has seen its sales slump since the end of last year. In comparison, Samsung's latest Galaxy model had AI features when it was launched in January, and Google's latest Pixel device had them in their launch last month. This is really an unusual place for Apple to be after being the torchbearer of personal computing with the Macintosh personal computer in the 80s, and being the pioneer of the smartphones with the first iPhone in the early 2000s. iPhones are still the company's major driver of revenue, representing just short of half of all sales in the last quarter at 45.8%. The second biggest revenue maker is digital services at around 28%, and many other sales are for products that are really tied to the iPhone, the iCloud services or AirPods, for instance. So making sure the product is competitive is crucial for the trillion-dollar company, with revenue last year that was worth the GDP of Denmark.
Wow, approaching 50% is incredible, that, isn't it? It's also quite rare, isn't it, Sean? These launches take place on Mondays. Why on earth is that?
Well, there are two reasons, all tied to the news cycle this Tuesday. First off, the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, perhaps overshadowing that launch. And also, second, is a resolution of a European Union Commission case over whether Apple has to pay $14 billion in taxes. That's about 13 billion euros. The argument being that Ireland, the country where it has its EU headquarters, provided the company with a sweetheart tax arrangement. That decision will be taking place this morning.
Yeah, I don't want the two things colliding. Let's look at the markets then. Where did Apple stock finish the session?
Well, Apple stock actually fell by 1.5% during the presentation, but by the close, it had recovered, basically finishing the session flat. This makes sense considering many of these new features had already been announced prior to the iPhone launch.
EU markets then, how are they doing right now?
Well, the major bourses in Europe opening lower this Tuesday following a more positive session on Wall Street after the worst week of the year last week. Uncertainty, really the word of the day in Europe there. You can see that the FTSE in London down 0.3%.
Now, a highly anticipated report on the EU's global competitiveness is really sounding the alarm on the bloc's economic and social future.
Last year, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen assigned former European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi the task of reviewing Europe's ability to compete with rivals like the US and China. Key among Draghi's findings is that the EU needs an additional 800 billion euros in investment to avoid being left behind. Brian Quinn has the details.
An existential challenge. In a landmark new report on EU competitiveness, former European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi says the bloc is being left behind by the US and China, putting its economic growth and its social model at risk.
The European Union values our prosperity, equity, freedom, peace and democracy in a sustainable world. And if Europe can no longer provide them to its people, it will have lost its reason for being.
Draghi says the EU needs 800 billion euros per year in new investments, an amount equivalent to 5% of the bloc's total GDP, more than twice the spending level of the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after World War II. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the bloc needs a fairer, more equitable economy, with growth driven in part by a clean energy transition.
The only way to ensure our long-term competitiveness is to shift away from fossil fuels and towards a clean, competitive and circular economy.
An over-reliance on the U.S. for defense also called out, with the report noting that European countries buy nearly two-thirds of their defense equipment from U.S. firms instead of investing in continental companies. To meet the spending levels called for, Draghi and von der Leyen want the EU to issue more common debt, as it did to fund COVID relief and recovery efforts. That call, though, already meeting with pushback from Germany, the bloc's top economy, itself struggling, wary of being called on to fund its poorer neighbors. Anticipating criticism, Draghi warned that the alternative is a slow agony. His report sure to be a topic of heated debate as the EU gets set to confirm its new commissioners in just days.
Charles, thank you very much. Charles Pellegrin with the business news for us there on France 24.